A question I get asked a lot is, where do I get my jumpers from? Or sweaters, or knits, whatever you guys want to call them, wherever you're from. I don't have a specific place. I sort of just get them whenever I find them. Whenever I find a nice one in a shop or whatever, I just buy it. Yeah, I don't really have a specific place. I don't tend to spend a lot of money either. I usually like to spend only like £20-30 because I like to go through lots of different jumpers. But it's funny because I always end up just wearing grey anyway, or black, or whatever. But anyway, getting a bit distracted. So what is up, guys? I wanted to do a review on the GH5. I've had it for a month. I wanted to do a sort of review from a YouTuber's perspective, because I wouldn't say I'm a filmmaker or like I make professional films or anything like that. I mainly just have a camera for doing YouTube videos and taking pictures. You know, it's not really meant to be a sort of full-on, you know, videography, cinematography setup. I just want something that's easy to use. We'll first start with the design. The GH5 for me is actually quite a big camera, but I know for a lot of other people who are going to a GH5, it's probably actually quite small. For someone like me who likes to run and gun and stuff, I do find it maybe a bit too large, because I did use a G80 before, G80, G85 depending on where you're from, and that is actually quite a small camera. It records 4K and stuff. The main reason I switched to this one from the G80 or G85 depending on where you're from is because I wanted 60 frames per second in 4K. There aren't actually any sort of like consumer level cameras that I'd say are quite affordable that do 4K at 60 FPS. It's quite rare actually. I'm surprised Panasonic are one of the first ones to do it. But yeah, that's one of the main reasons why I went for the GH5. There are of course some other reasons. For example, the bit rates of the files are much higher, and when you have a much higher bit rate, usually you get better quality video, and you can also adjust the footage a lot more easily. So for example, if you're trying to apply a LUT or trying to change exposure or whatever, obviously it's not going to be as good as a raw file, but you still get a lot of leeway when you have high bitrate files. I really like the dual card slots on the camera, and there's actually quite a lot of functionality that you can use there. I've set it up so that pictures go to one SD card and video go to the other, but you can set it up in various ways. For example, you could have it so that it mirrors, so there's always a copy on the other card. So if you're taking pictures on one card, you can always be sure that there's another copy on the other card. Or you can have it so that once one memory card fills up, it just naturally goes over to the next memory card. So yeah, that's very useful. Having dual SD card slots is something which I never thought would be much needed, but I've actually found it very, very useful when it comes to doing photo and video work. One of the advantages of having quite a large body for a camera is you can have a ton of buttons on it, and that is probably one of the biggest strengths of the GH5. There are so many buttons, so many dials, so many different things on it where you can adjust so much. It's just insane, and there's so many different ports as well. There's a headphone jack, microphone jack, HDMI port, USB-C port, shortcut buttons all over the thing. There's a joystick on the back as well. There are dials on the top. The dials on the top are really, really useful for when you want to quickly change things like exposure, white balance, ISO. Just, you know, if you want to tweak stuff really very, very quickly, having buttons is the way to go. You don't want to be messing around touching a screen. Another great part of the GH5 is that it has a flip out screen. A lot of cameras these days don't seem to have flip out screens, and if you're someone like me who wants to hold a camera in front of you, or I'm recording right now and you want to be able to see yourself, you need a flip out screen, you know. Having a flip out screen just makes recording and seeing yourself and making sure you're in frame so much easier. It's much easier to use than say some of the Sony cameras which don't have a flip out screen. You know, for a Sony camera you might have to buy like a screen that goes on top or goes to the side just to be able to see yourself if you're a one-man sort of band like I am, because I don't have someone behind the camera operating the camera for me. Most of my videos I record just by myself. One of the main issues I do have with the design though is where the display button is. So the display button on the back of the camera is sort of where your thumb would naturally rest. It's where my thumb naturally rests anyway. And the amount of times I've pressed that button by accident and it's changed what is showing me on the screen is just a pain in the arse, to be honest. It's placed in a pretty bad position for me. I don't know if other people have been having this issue, but for me, where that display button is, I just keep pressing it by accident, because obviously you're gripping the camera, and it's not exactly a light camera. The GH5 is actually quite a heavy camera, and once you've got a lens on it as well, if you want a high quality lenses are heavy. So, you know, once you have a lens and you have the camera, it's actually quite a heavy camera where if you're holding it by one hand, you really do have to grip it so it doesn't slip out of your hands, and so that it's steady when you're taking pictures and video. The casing itself is made out of a very hard plastic. It's not metal or anything, but obviously I know choosing plastic is much lighter than choosing metal, so I can see why Panasonic chose it. The grip itself has a rubber coating, so it's not just going to slip out of your hands either. The viewfinder on this camera is absolutely excellent. I've gotten used to using viewfinders now. Before, I didn't actually use viewfinders. I always used the screen on the camera. I thought the screen was just easier to use. But when you're recording outside and you're taking pictures outside, having a viewfinder is so useful, because obviously if it's bright sunlight and you want to be able to frame your picture properly, get the exposure right and all that sort of stuff, you want to have a viewfinder. You want to be able to hold it up to your eye and actually see what you're going to take a picture of. And the viewfinder is an incredible resolution. It's really bright. It's just an incredible viewfinder. I'm very impressed by it. So the way I have my GH5 set up is I have the 12-35 2.8 Mark II lens, and I have the Rode Video Micro on top as a microphone. Very simple setup. I found this setup to be the best sort of all-round setup for me and my use case, because I don't want to keep changing lenses. I don't want to have big old microphone setups or anything. I want to have a very, very lean setup that I can just carry with me wherever I need to go, and whenever I need to get it set up, I don't want to have to just mess around with lots of stuff. So yeah, this lens setup and this microphone setup with this camera is just amazing. I think it's probably the best setup you can have with the GH5. The main reason I chose this lens is because it's a zoom lens. It gives you an equivalent focal length of 24-70mm, which is quite a big focal length. You know, it covers a lot of range there. With an aperture of 2.8, you do get some really, really nice depth of field. I love taking shots with the shallow depth of field. I've shot quite a few photos with this setup, and I've shared them on my Twitter and my Instagram, so make sure to follow me on there. You'll see some shots that I've taken from the camera, I've edited and tweaked a little bit, and they just look incredible. They look proper professional. You know, I'm not a professional photographer or anything. I just take pictures for fun. I'm much more of a sort of hobbyist, and so the picture quality is just insane. I think it's amazing. A great feature with this lens is that it also uses the stabilization in conjunction with the GH5, and the GH5 stabilization is incredible with this lens. A lot of the shots that you see in my LA and Infinity video have just been taken by hand, like the ones where I'm sort of swaying side to side. These are all taken with with this lens and with this camera setup without any sort of other additional stabilizers or gimbals. It's almost as if the camera itself is a gimbal. When you're recording in 60 FPS and you're recording in 4K, you know, you can slow down that footage by half to 30 FPS, and you're getting really nice slow-mo with very nice tracking and very nice smooth motion. I'm honestly super impressed at how good the stabilization is with this lens and with this camera. I'll insert some footage now from my Dubai trip. I used the GH5 with the 12-35mm lens, just so you can get a good feel of how good the quality of the video is. If you check out my LA/Infinity video, a lot of that video was shot with the 12-35mm lens. Every single shot was taken with the GH5, but sometimes I switched to the 7-14mm lens as well, just so I can get a very wide angle so that, you know, I can get a lot into the frame. And the microphone I use is the same microphone I'm using for this video, the Rode Video Micro. So the sensor you'll find in this camera is a Micro Four Thirds sensor. It's not the biggest, you know, it's not as big as a full frame, and it's smaller than APS-C as well. But I think for most people, a Micro Four Thirds sensor is enough. All of my pictures that you see on my Instagram and my Twitter are all taken with Micro Four Thirds cameras. And one of the main reasons I like Micro Four Thirds, it can be fitted into such a small frame, such as the GM1, which I use for a lot of my pictures because it's just so small. I can just stick my camera in my pocket and just go anywhere. It doesn't look daunting and it's not heavy and bulky at all, which is just great. That's why I love the GM1. One of the main reasons why the body of the GH5 is so big, whilst the sensor is so small, is so that they can fit the 5-axis stabilization inside the camera. You know, if you want stabilization in a camera, you do have to create space around the lens so that the lens can move around to motion and counter react to your motion. That's one of the main things to consider when you want a camera with incredible stabilization. You know, if you want stabilization, you're most likely going to have quite a large body. From the videos I've seen on YouTube, it looks like the GH5 has some of the best stabilization. Probably one of the best right now. It's just that good. I think one of the best things that Panasonic do well is the software on their cameras. You know, when it comes to browsing through the menus, going through options and stuff like that, Previous cameras were brilliant, you know, you could easily go through stuff, but they've done an amazing job with the GH5. They've updated the firmware, they've made it even faster, they've made it even better looking, and there's so many different things you can do. You can have so many different shortcuts, you can set up a custom menu the way you want it, you can go through different setups that you like. For example, on the top of the camera you have different custom functions on the dial, and what I've done is I've set up 2 custom functions on the top so that I can switch between 25 FPS and 50 FPS as quickly as possible. You know, there'll be times where maybe I want to record myself, or whenever I'm in front of the camera I want to do 25 FPS, but then say I want to do some slow-mo footage, I quickly switch to 50 FPS and then I'll be recording some slow-mo footage that I want to include in my video too. So I've gone through quite a few good things about this camera, but let's go through some of the bad. I'd say one of the bad things about this camera is how big it is. You know, even though it's got a micro four thirds sensor, it's still quite a large camera, and it's also quite heavy. You know, if you're someone who wants to run and gun, film on the go, have their camera out all the time, it is going to get quite tiring carrying this setup around all the time. You know, some of the Sony setups and some of the other Panasonic cameras are smaller and lighter. You know, I guess it's one of the things you have to just compromise with if you want all the features and functionality that the GH5 has to offer. There is also the autofocus. The autofocus on the GH5 it's abysmal, to be honest. It really isn't great. It doesn't even come close to some of the autofocus that you find on the Canon cameras and the Sony cameras. And if you're someone who's looking for incredible autofocus when you're vlogging or when you're switching between subjects and stuff, the GH5 might let you down a little bit. The best way that I've combated it is when I want to record myself when I'm on the go, I use the 7-14mm lens because it keeps a lot of the frame in focus, so it's not hunting for focus so often. If you're using a lens with a low aperture like the one I'm using now with the 2.8 and you're sitting in front of the camera like I am, you're better off putting it in manual focus and then just setting the focus and leaving it be, because the autofocus will just keep hunting, and you can really see that it's hunting and it's trying, but it's not doing a very good job. So yeah, that is definitely one of the biggest weaknesses about the GH5, the autofocus. So is the GH5 a camera I'd recommend? I think so. If you're someone like me who does tech videos and stuff like that and does YouTube videos, it's a great camera for that sort of stuff, you know, because it's very easy to use, it's very simple to set up, and there's not much to go into just to start recording. But if you're also someone who wants to record professional videos, professional movies, and have a proper setup with like a cage and a rig and all that sort of stuff, you can also do that too. The GH5 is such a capable camera, it can do so much. You can record at 4K at very high bit rates, you can do all sorts with the footage. I mean, for someone like me, I'm really not going to take advantage of like the super high like 10-bit recording formats and whatever else the GH5 has. My main reason for going with the GH5 was to have 60 FPS 4K. That was one of the main reasons, because I like to record slow motion 4K footage. Of course, it's not going to be super slow-mo, but it's good enough slow-mo where I could half the speed of the footage. There is of course some compromises you're going to have to make, such as autofocus. So if you're someone who's vlogging and is always out on the go, the GH5 may not be the best choice, you know, because you're looking for it to do a lot of the work for you when it comes to focusing. The GH5 is much better set up where if you have it in manual focus and you do the focusing yourself or whatever, you know, it's much better for things like that. One of the other things with the GH5 is it is quite expensive. It's not exactly a cheap camera. It's not exactly a budget setup at all. You know, it's for someone who is quite passionate about photography and video, you know, because one of the best things about this camera is that it can do both photos and videos. You know, it can be used as a very sort of a dual camera setup. You know, you can just have one camera which does photos and videos. If you're looking for something a bit cheaper, I probably would recommend something like the G7 or the G80. You are obviously going to lack quite a few features with those cameras, but they're so much cheaper. They're like a third of the price of this. And the G80 was a camera that I used before, and most of the B-roll in this video was shot with the G80. So the G80 is still very much a capable camera. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. It wasn't really meant to be a proper detailed review. There's so many other detailed reviews out there. I wanted to do it from a perspective of a hobbyist almost, where someone like me where YouTube isn't my full-time job, photography also isn't my full-time job. I'm just very passionate about both photography and video, and yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.